What's up, NineTen? Sean.
That's
Sean. We're here,
Sean
and
Shar.
we are so stoked to jump into another week of going through the Gospels.
Yes.
It's an endless summer.
It really is.
And we get to look at the life of Jesus, the teachings that he did, the way that he walked and talked and lived, his day-to-day life, and
Through
hopefully mimic that.
all four of the Gospels.
All four of them.
But today, we find ourselves in Matthew.
We do.
Matthew 5. So grab your Bibles.
If you don't have it yet,
Flip there.
I'll say it every week. Run to your kitchen, your bedroom, your bathroom, wherever you keep this thing, go get it.
Get it out of your closet. Dust it off. We're jumping into Matthew 5.
So stoked.
And Matthew 5 is the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount, which is one of Jesus' most often taught and common teachings about what his kingdom is going to look like and how he will establish that kingdom through his people. And in this passage, we were both kind of talking and felt like this is an area we're both pretty passionate about, and also kind of a revolutionary thought that Jesus presents here. But Matthew 5, verse 14 is where we're going to start. And it reads, Shar, do you want to read it?
Yeah, I'd love to. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven.
So good. Yeah. An awesome passage that I would imagine if you've spent any amount of time in church, you've probably heard the
Yes.
reference of like, you are lights or light of the world, how we kind of operate and exist as this light. And yet, one, that's true, and we'll elaborate a little bit more on that in a second. But contextually, if you look at this moment in history as Jesus stands before this particular crowd, this is a really profound statement that he's making. And there's kind of three things that lead that to be kind of controversial in that time. One being that most rabbis, if they were distinguished enough or good enough at their job or kind of revolutionary teachers, the city would typically refer to them as like lights of the universe, or it was kind of just a bragging claim that they were this like, oh, our teaching's so good, so we are the lights of this world, the light of this town. So it was a title that was typically given to rabbis that were really good at what they did. And now Jesus, standing before a crowd of like bummy fishermen,
Tax collectors,
farmers in a poor area, goes, you're lights of the world, and elevates them now to the same level as well-educated, rich rabbis. So controversy number one. Controversy number two is that there's a festival that they celebrate yearly called the Festival of the Tabernacles, which honors and celebrates God delivering people through the Exodus story in the wilderness. And what they would do is they had this thing called the Light of the World, which is this giant, like almost 4-story tall candelabra, which is this big like pillar. And when they would ignite it, it would legitimately light up the entire city of Jerusalem to honor and recognize God's delivering light. So controversy number two, Jesus just called this crowd of people to be like that same pillar that ignites and represents God's delivering light. And then, Shar, you noticed a cool point in John 8 that is also really rad.
Yeah, so in addition to this, later in John 8, we'll read that Jesus proclaims that he is the light of the world and that whoever walks with him will not walk in darkness. And so not only is he proclaiming, I am the light of the world, he's inviting his followers, his believers, who we now are today, to also be that same light, which is pretty crazy, right?
Super crazy.
Someone's proclaiming, I'm the light, basically like, I don't know, denouncing that those others that are calling themselves light of the world aren't, because Jesus is like, no, I'm the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through me. So this is part of Jesus radically saying, like, I am different than who has come before me, and so take note of that. And then I love that it's this invitation that we too are invited to be lights. And I think we'll notice here he's proclaiming both right before that in verse 13, you'll read, you are the salt of the earth. And he says, you are the light of the world. It's not really a choice.
No.
Like, he's not saying you got to choose if you want to be a light here or there. But it's like, this is a declaration of being, which is kind of what identity is, right?
Totally.
Like, we don't get to choose our identity. Like, I want to be like this and this and this. It's like when we follow Christ, we take on a Christ-like identity. And so I think what's so cool about this is like, this is a responsibility, but also like kind of a heavy.
Yeah, it's
like,
not extracurricular. It's not like, oh, I'm a high school student, but I've chosen to also be a football player.
Right.
It's like, no, this comes with the decision.
Yes.
Like, you are operating in this all the time now.
So if we're under the assumption, like us as 9th and 10th graders in the NineTen ministry, if you say you are a follower of Christ, you are a light of this world.
Totally.
And so what does that mean? Like, what does that look like for us?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, right, like there's the context, there's the significance of this moment, right? But you could tote around the title light, but what is that like actually, what is Jesus calling us to do here? I think is a really important question to ask before we just run around and be like, oh yeah, like I'm the light. And I think the pictures that he presents are really helpful and understand the challenge that he's putting in our plate here as well. Right, let's read it again. Verse 14, you are the light of the world, and a town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand and give its light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others so that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. I think one of the two important factors here is that one, he goes, you are the light of the world. And then second, he goes, you're like a town built on a hill. And if you're to break apart two of those things, just kind of in their simplicity, what do? Light of the world, we're going to look back. That's always going to remind me of Exodus going, the light of the world is this pillar of light that signifies the Exodus pillar that guided these people out of darkness, out of wilderness, in their chaos and confusion. So right there, I think he's going, crowd before me, my kingdom people, your existence is to lead people out of darkness. And then the other part is that he goes, you're a town on a hill. And collectively as God's people, right, a town is not one person. That would just be a home. But a town is a collection of people. And he goes, as you guys exist in this world, if you were to be on a hill in the midst of this darkness that the world is, be different. Like, stand out amongst them. I think we don't have a lot of mountains in this area.
No, I was just thinking about that. We're pretty sea low.
Yeah, but when we, like, I think when we go up to Sahale, we start to, like, come up that hill.
Yeah.
And it kind of clicks for us, where you start to see these towns that are a bit higher than us. And when all of their lights on around, like, dinner time, when the sun has set and everyone's in their home cooking dinner or sitting down, right? You start to see these neighborhoods that appear on this mountain. They become really obvious in the midst of like mountain darkness.
Yeah.
And it stands out. And as I think Jesus is looking at his people going, collectively be different, be noticeable, be seen in the midst of darkness here.
Well, and that's exactly what light does, right? Like it disbands darkness from existing around it, and what it does, it illuminates what's around it. Like it, for example, in this room, we're in
There's a huge light right
There's
there.
no lights around us other than maybe a little bit of the June gloom sunlight coming through, but there are lights right here. Steven waving in the
Shout
back.
out to Steve.
Shout out to Steve. But these lights are shining on us, and I cannot help but notice these lights, right? Like
Totally.
I am drawn to it because they're capturing my
Absolutely.
attention, and they're also what's enabling for you guys to see us. Because if these lights weren't on, it'd be pitch black, and maybe you would just hear our voices. But
Yeah.
I mean, again, we grow up, we know what lights are. I had a night light in my house because it's like,
Nice.
I don't want to stumble going to the bathroom.
Yeah.
And so you put that on just so it guides the way, right? And so Jesus here again proclaiming, this is your new identity. You are lights of this world, and people are now going to be drawn to you, just like we're drawn to these. And so I think that's
sure.
a big part we wanted to talk about too.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that, right, like just existing is not being light. Like once you have said, I'm a Christian now, it doesn't exclusively make you a light in the world, right? But it's important to note that that light that you are is being different than the rest of the world around you. And that's essentially what the Sermon on the Mount is going to depict, right? Right after this, he's going to spend 2 more chapters dishing out how do we be different on the topics of murder and gossip and adultery and like all of these topics. He's going to go, here's how we as a people of God's kingdom are going to be different in this world. And that's essentially what it means to be a light, is what differentiates us in the world.
Yeah.
So I think it'd be cool. I think Ephesians 5:8 uses the term children of light.
Ooh, yeah. Let's read that.
So contextually, you run through the whole course of the Bible, right? Being a light is a large theme that's found. So let's look at some of these things that make us different and being that light in this dark world.
Yeah, so Ephesians 5 verse 8 says, "For you were once in darkness, but now you are light in the Lord." Live as children of light, for the fruit of the light consists in all goodness, righteousness, and truth, and find out what pleases the Lord. Have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them. It is shameful even to mention what the disobedient do in secret, but everything exposed by the light becomes visible, and everything that is illuminated becomes a light. This is why it is said. And I just love that. And I think what we should note too is Jesus is making this distinction of like, just like there is, right? God is a God of love and he's a God of justice. And he can exist and be both of those things. But in this world, there is darkness and then there's light. There is hatred and there is love. And so we kind of are always living in these tensions,
which
right?
I think now more than ever can we probably commonly agree on that point.
Yeah.
Where it's like, yeah, we have a lot that's screaming something's wrong with this world on the topics of injustice, racial injustice, COVID-19 is in existence.
Yeah.
People are panicking, like our comfort has been shaken in jobs. And yeah, like I think right now is a very obvious time of darkness.
There's a lot of darkness.
Even though it's summer. It's
and
July.
We might even find, yeah, true. But it should be light and airy. But we could be finding ourselves like living in that same darkness too.
Yes.
Right? And
absolutely.
Why is that the case?
Yes. Wait, what?
why do we stumble into like looking a lot more like the world and falling into that area of darkness?
Yeah, I think it's comfortable and it's not challenged often. Like I knew in my time before knowing Jesus that darkness didn't, like I would have never labeled my life as darkness until I saw people living in light. And I that was like, whoa, wait, you're doing life way better than I am. And the same things are happening to me, but you're handling them very differently. And yeah, I think if darkness is never challenged, we'll naturally just go like, well, it doesn't get better than this. Like, this is how I will do life, and this is how I'll always do life until God's people come along and go, actually, there's a better way to do life. And I think that's important. In Matthew 5:16, Jesus kind of points out three different things. Like that 6 game. Yeah, I love that game. I sucked at that game though. But he points out three different things that I think are really important for us to look at in operating in this question of how do I actually be light then? And the first thing that he points out is to recognize your platform. He says others, that we are to be light in front of others. And I think one of the more obvious things, right, especially as high school students, is that I think sometimes we feel like we're most lights when we're at school. It's typical that a high schooler is challenged to be a light to their classmates, their friends, and when we come to school, it's a little bit easier to clock in and go like, I will be different in high school. But then when summer comes around, I think we almost lose that feeling because it doesn't feel like we're showing up to be a light. And yet others is not exclusive to one platform. I think there's intentional others where we go like, for me, my family is very much a very intentional place that I try to be a light, where I show up and go, it is very important for me to be different right now. But what's also true is that when I'm at work and I'm at a coffee shop or I'm just surfing. Like the other day, I almost got mad because this guy stole my wave. I was like, oh, it's not worth it. Like, don't compromise your ministry here to like yell at a surfer. Right. But like all of those places, just as we go, like you said, it's not an optional calling. Like we are constantly on duty to the others around us in this world.
And I think it begs the question, and I want you guys to write this down because I was really convicted when thinking about it too. Like, does the way that we live our lives cause other people to question?
Yeah.
Who do you belong to? Like, what makes you so different? How are you finding joy in COVID-19? How are you on earth knowing that there is a God of justice who's going to come and make everything right in this world? Like, it doesn't make sense that you're able to have a peace that surpasses understanding during this time. And I think that if we think about that question, when I live, do people walk away thinking there's something different there? And that's what light does, right? Like it is illuminating, it shines, it is set apart, and it's different from the rest of the world. And I love that question, and I think I just really want to wrestle with that this week too. Yeah,
it's good to examine like like when I step out of my house, like what is others to me? Like where do I, and especially in a social media driven world where it's like, legitimately what you post on Instagram is out in the world now. And does it stay consistent with the ministry that you have as a light? Are you the same person that people are going to see in social media as they are in the actual like real physical tangible you. I think that's also a really important point to make there. The second thing that we're going to see is that he goes, they will see that by your good deeds. And this is not to elevate good deeds to this platform of like, I'm just going to do good things so that people see me do good things. And we'll hit on that in just a second. But what does make us radically different in this world is how we actually do things in the world. When you are found in this season of life where racial injustice is like a huge topic that's being talked about, how are you operating differently in it? How are you advocating the kingdom's purpose in it and Jesus's words on it? And how are you, like, if gossip comes your way, do you partake in it or do you refuse to be a part of it? And do you step away from that moment? What else? Like,
but we do none of it, right, to exalt our own name.
Absolutely.
And it's not because we want to take on this, like, I'm producing my own light. Like, no, we are called to be light receivers and light givers. And so just as much as Jesus says, I'm the light of the world, we are drawn to that same light. And so I think that's how I became a Christian, right? We say, there's something different about this God. How is he so loving? And how has he forgiven me from my wretchedness? And the fact that I once lived in darkness. Like, that's what Ephesians 5 is saying. Like, you once knew darkness, for all have fallen short from the glory of God. And I just have to remember I once was living in darkness too, and now I know this light. And so when I live and conduct myself, am I doing so that people are drawn to that same light? And I can confidently say, follow me as I truly follow the other light, the one that I'm being drawn to.
And I think that's so cool when you run back to Jesus here. Like, Jesus showed up and he very quickly showed himself to be different in this world and drew people to him because of that difference and taught these radical teachings. And with that came these people that went, whoa, wait, you're on a whole nother level of life right now. Like, you're doing something that is attractive to us and controversial in that time. But now, as people that have received that light and truth from him, we have to step into this world and go, no, actually, like, gossip isn't cool. Like, lust and pornography and all of these things, like, they're not necessary to be a guy. And it's like, we get to now walk through this world's darkness and triumphantly like proclaim a different way of life. To elevate that kingdom, which leads us to our last point, is that it's not about us, but it's all about God's glory. And that's where he ends it in verse 16. It goes, like, inevitably, we are proud children bragging about a good father who has done a great work in our life. And that great work has led us to be different. And I think you noticed something cool as well.
Something to note here in Matthew 5, this is the first time that Jesus like proclaims the Father as like Father over us. Like, not only does he say like, oh, I've come because of my Father has sent me, he's now speaking to his disciples and his followers and saying like, no, you're going to do this and you're going to glorify your Father in heaven. And I love that like personal touch too. We're just like, come in, come listen. Like, there is an identity change here that's going on in the people of the time there and now in our lives too. And so when we live, are we living not so that it like glorifies us, but so that it's glorifying our Father?
Yeah. And I think that's right. There's going to be so much light giving that you do that won't be recognized by the world. And that's so important to know that, right? It's not about the people that come up to you and go like, hey man, it's really crazy that you're different. Because that's not going to happen a lot. Like, that hasn't happened a lot in my life and maybe not yours either. And it's cool when they do. And sometimes it does. But I think the reality is that ultimately we're just trying to elevate and illuminate God's kingdom. I just finished one of the Narnia books, and there's this little character. His name's Reepicheep, and he's like a little mouse. And he's just like, I've always been fascinated by his character because he's like just consistent in his character, knowing that he represents this kingdom of Narnia. In the book that I was reading, they're hopping from like island to island of these unexplored places.
As you do
as a 2-foot tall mouse in Narnia. And just consistently, he would show up to these places knowing that his character mattered to these unknown people because he represents the kingdom of Narnia. Yeah. And I just found that so fascinating to know that like consistently as we go about life, no matter who we interact with, we are on duty as ambassadors for God's kingdom. Yeah. And everything we do is an opportunity to glorify like what is to come and who our Father is.
Yeah. And it's so cool because we as the church are called to do this together, right?
Yes.
Like you think of a city, I don't know how many of you have been down to San Diego, but that's probably the closest big city we have here.
Yeah.
But you look at the San Diego skyline and there's not just one building that's lit up, right? Or like that one office building. You can tell when like an office is empty and there's only like a couple, the rooms that are lit up. And you're like, are you still at work? It's 10 p.m.
Go home.
Good for you. But when the whole city is lit up, you're like, man, I am so drawn to that. That is so cool. And so like we as the church now put this on. Like we are ambassadors for Christ, not only alone. And so hence why are we in life groups, right? We are not meant to walk this life alone. And
Absolutely.
so the more light is clustered together, like picture you're at North Coast Church and it's just like this beacon of light for all of Vista and all of North County. And like if we just shone so brightly, I know it's like a lot of imagery here, but like just as much as these lights are on us, like that light continues to go out and go out. And when we as the church are called to like unite as one body together, like the whole world's going to be freaking lit up.
Yeah, it should be attractive.
Yeah.
Like, I think God's goal for the church was to be this very attractive pointer to freedom and life and like the hope that God's kingdom has in the midst of a world that is very opposite of that.
Yeah.
And collectively we get to be this cool representation of our Father's character.
Yeah. And so, which kind of leads us to just like examine a few things in our lives, right? Like recognize who are the others in our lives that we are being lights to. First off, actually, are we even following the light ourselves? Like, are we following Jesus in this daily relationship? And we will emphasize that till the day we stop being in NineTen. But forever, really, like, are we daily reading the word and like recognizing this is what Jesus wants to teach us? He has drawn in the people that are near to him and saying, this is so important. I want you to know this is who you are now in light of who I am. And then that people are going to notice. And so that should be both accountability, but a huge like honor and responsibility of like, I now am new and in Christ, and so I am this ambassador, and these others are going to notice whether I know they're noticing or not, right? That's integrity, doing the right thing without anybody like recognizing or giving you credit for it.
Totally.
And then kind of closing too, it's like, are we examining our own hearts? Because light and darkness can't exist together, right? Like the sun rises for a certain reason and it brings out light. And then when it goes away, it's dark. There's no like, we can't have it be nighttime and the sun to still be out.
No.
It just doesn't exist. And so where in our lives are we like walking in darkness still? Like I know I need to check on that too. And just examine, am I falling away from the light because I'm looking a lot more like the world?
Yeah. Those dark patches will inevitably hinder the potential of your light.
Yeah.
If we were to cover like a part of this, there would be less light in the room.
Yeah, and there'd be like a shadow over half of our face. And
it's ruining our like potential
right
as ambassadors for his kingdom. So I think it's so important that we ask and look and go, where are those patches of dark that still exist in my life and how do I get rid of it? Which is a great place to talk to your life group leaders and going what are those blind spots? What are those areas of my life and how can I get rid of them?
Yeah. And this week in the blog, be sure that if you haven't been checking those out already, we want to walk together in this, right? Like we want to be lights together and be equipping each other daily, and know there's great resources for that. We're diving into the word as a staff and then also want to communicate that to you guys and stimulate those conversations with you as well. And we say like, okay, how can we be better lights? Like together as 910, as we go out in the world this summer, even with masks on, right? Like we're still not hidden. We can still shine our light even though, with the smiles, you just show it with your eyes. And with your heart, obviously. But be sure to check those out. We want to break down this week kind of like in what areas are we called to live as lights and how are we going to distinctively look different? And so I would love to just close this in prayer before we go out. But we love you guys and we can't wait for more Zoom calls and to meet up again in person sometime again soon. Who knows? New merch coming. There's a lot of great stuff.
910's thriving.
910 is thriving. Lord, God, you are a father of lights, and thank you for calling us your children of lights. May you stir in us, and may we kindle a relationship with you daily so that you make us a city on a hill that's not hidden. God, thank you for seeing us and loving us and knowing the depths of our heart and loving us even when we walked in darkness too. May we as the church come together and be your people, proudly proclaiming that you are our Father, and may all that we say and all that we do and the way that we love and act be ultimately to glorify you. We love you. Thank you for loving us first. Amen.
Amen.